All right, let's get into Kapitel 3.1. So, guten Morgen, maybe guten Morgen if you're watching this in the morning, or maybe guten Tag if you're watching in the afternoon, guten Tag, or maybe guten Abend in the evening. So, here we have the exercises from the last unit, at the end of the last unit. So, ordinal numbers. We've got some ordinal numbers in these sentences, and we want to make sure we're translating them correctly. So, heute ist der 7. Juli, which is today is the 7th of July, or you might say July 7th. The most important thing here is obviously to get that TH on the end, or you could write out the word 7th. Just make sure the TH is there to indicate that you understand that this is an ordinal number, the 7th. Morgen ist der 8. Juli. Tomorrow is the 8th of July, or July 8th. Neujahr ist der 1. Januar. New Year's Day is the 1st of January, or January 1st. Weihnachten ist der 25. Dezember. So Christmas is the 25th of December, der 25. 25th. Erntedankfest ist der 4. Donnerstag im November. Thanksgiving is the 4th Thursday in November. So the 4th Thursday, der 4. Donnerstag. Der 3. Oktober ist der Tag der deutschen Einheit. The 3rd of October is the Day of German Unity, which refers to 1990, 3rd of October, when Germany was officially reunified. The wall fell in 89, and then official reunification happened in 1990, so that's why the 3rd of October is the Day of German Unity, and all the grocery stores are closed. Yeah. So, 1517 is, of course, 1517. If you're a Martin Luther fan, you'll know why that one is important. 1871, 1871, which is, of course, the year that Germany became an official country. 1914, 1914, but we don't say the 100 part in English, just 1914. 1914, 1939, 1939, 1945, 1945, 1961, that's the year that the Berlin Wall was erected. 1989, yeah. 1989, of course, you know when the Berlin Wall fell. 2014 is also an important year in German history because Germany won the World Cup that year. And I was living in Berlin that year, and you can probably imagine how excited the Germans were when they won that year. It was a fun place to be in Berlin when the night that Germany won the World Cup. Okay, so welches Datum ist das? Write out the dates as numerals in the German format too. So der 1. Mai 1999 is, of course, the 1st of May 1999. Der 28. August 1749 is then the 28th of August with the day first and then the month. 1749. 1749. That is the birthday of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Yes, if you are into dramas and poetry, you might like Goethe. Der 17. Juli 1955. So 1955 would be then 17th of July 1955, which is the day that Disneyland opened. Der 3. Oktober 1990, which is, of course, our Day of German Unity that we had before. So it started, of course, in 1990, and then every year on the 3rd of October it's celebrated. Okay, Kapitel 3.1, der Dativ. So now we're getting to the dative, but let's review the nominative and accusative first so that we can really have our footing when we get to the dative. So, ich trinke einen Kaffee. We think to ourselves, what's the verb, what's the subject, what's the direct object? Well, I drink a coffee. The subject is I, the verb is trinke, and then the direct object is einen Kaffee, because the action of the verb is trinken, to drink, and then who drinks? I drink. I drink what? That's a coffee. So that's the nominative for the subject, accusative for the direct object. Let's try. Ich habe einen Stuhl. I have a chair. So the action is the having, the verb, and then who has? I have, that's the subject. And then I have what? What do I have? That's the chair, that's the direct object in the accusative. And then we learned that you use the nominative for subjects, like the ones we saw just now, but also for predicate nouns, like David Hasselhoff ist Rocksänger. David Hasselhoff is a rock singer. Or you'd say like, das ist der Präsident. Das ist der Präsident, meaning that is the president, and then that's in the nominative, not in the accusative, even though it's after the noun. So nominative is used for subjects and predicate nouns. Then the accusative is used for direct objects we've learned so far, right? So then we need to remember how we recognize the accusative, and that's mostly in the masculine where you get den and einen. Den Vater, einen Vater. These, I also have the pronouns on this chart, but we haven't done those yet. We will get to these pronouns very soon, though. So let's remember how to identify a predicate noun or direct object. Ich besuche meine Großmutter. I visit my grandmother, and it's a direct object because she's receiving that action. It's ich and Großmutter are two different people, and it's the action here is being performed on the grandmother. But we can try Placido Domingo ist Opernsänger. Placido Domingo is an opera singer, and so this one's actually a predicate noun, which is in the nominative. And of course, whenever you see the verb sein, werden, and bleiben, to be, to become, and to stay or remain, it's always going to be a predicate noun after. Okay, but we can try Ich trage einen Hut, which is I wear a hat, and then that's a direct object because I wear what? I wear a hat. So let's try Ich esse eine Banane. I eat a banana. Is eine Banane, is that going to be a predicate noun or a direct object? It's a direct object because it receives the action of eating. Das ist der neue Student. Now the verb is to be, so that is a huge indicator that we're actually dealing with a predicate noun here, not with a direct object, and it's going to be the nominative, der neue Student, because it's masculine. If this were in the accusative, it would be den, not der. Okay, and then we can remember a few of these examples. Die Stühle, Jens kauft die Stühle, Jens buys the chairs, or maybe leave off the article in the plural, Jens kauft Stühle. But then if we want to do a singular masculine, we need to do Jens kauft den DVD-Spieler, Jens kauft einen DVD-Spieler, or der Schreibtisch, Jens kauft den Schreibtisch, Jens kauft einen Schreibtisch. So now we're going to add our datives. We're going to keep using the accusative and the nominative, obviously, but we're going to add in some dative. So let's look at Ich habe eine Orange. Normally in class I actually have an orange with me and I show it. I don't even have any oranges right now. I have apples. Maybe I'll get an apple later. Ich habe eine Orange. So Subjekt, direkt ist Objekt. That's pretty straightforward. Nominativ, Akkusativ. Ich gebe der Frau eine Orange. I give the woman an orange. And so we can look at the subject does the action. The verb is give. And then the direct object is still eine Orange. That hasn't changed. But now we're giving the orange to the woman. So that's the indirect object. I give what? I give the orange. But to whom do I give the orange? That is to the woman. So that's an indirect object, and indirect objects require the dative case. So we can look at another example with a masculine. Der Frau is feminine, and it's interesting. You'll see why in a moment. It actually changes to der Frau. It makes it look like it's masculine suddenly, but it's still feminine because this article has changed in order to indicate that it is dative. So let's try one with masculine. Ich gebe dem Mann eine Orange. I give the man an orange. Or you could say, I give an orange to the man. So this is still the subject, ich. And then this is the direct object. But then who is the indirect recipient of the action? That's dem Mann, to the man. So the subject's the nominative, the accusative is the direct object, and then the indirect object is always going to be in the dative case. So, ich gebe dem Kind eine Orange. So now we have the same thing, but with a neuter noun, and you can see the masculine and the neuter are going to take the same form in the dative. Dem Mann and dem Kind. So that's the indirect object, and that's in the dative. So we use the nominative for subjects and predicate nouns, we use the accusative for direct objects, and then we use the dative for indirect objects. That's what we need the dative for right now. We can use it for other things too, but for now, just indirect objects. So let's look at some examples. Die Kellnerin bringt dem Gast das Essen, which is the server brings the guest the food. So die Kellnerin, the server, dem Gast, to the guest, or just the guest, and then das Essen, the food or the meal. So I ask ourselves, what's the subject? What's in the nominative? Die Kellnerin. That's the subject. What's the direct object? What is in the accusative? That's das Essen. She brings the food, right? But to whom does she bring the food, or for whom does she do this action? That is dem Gast, to the guest. She brings to the guest the food. She brings the food to the guest. So let's try with der Kellner bringt dem Gast den Wein. So now we've got the server brings the guest the wine. So Subjekt Nominativ, der Kellner. That's the subject. What is the direct object? That's den Wein, and because it's masculine, you can really tell that it's in the accusative there. And then what is our indirect object? It's dem Gast, to the guest, and that is it's masculine, der Gast in the nominative, but then dem Gast in the indirect object dative. So now we see where these all come from. So nominative, der Vater, accusative, den Vater. Then the dative, dem. So when we want to use a masculine noun as a direct object, we need to say dem instead of one of these, right? And then einem, you can see the M appearing on both of those, and then these are pronouns that we'll do later. And then der Mutter, einer Mutter. So it's interesting that we end up changing the feminine. It's die in the nominative and accusative, and now the feminine changes to der, which makes it look like it's actually masculine because it's the nominative masculine is der, but then the dative feminine is also der. So they share a form. They both use der, but for different reasons. So when you say der Mutter as an indirect object in the dative, it didn't become masculine or anything. It's still a feminine noun. It's just that that's how feminine dative is. Feminine dative uses der instead of die, and that's just how it is. And then einer would be what you need there. And look how different this is. Ein Vater, no ending, versus einer Mutter with the er ending. So they don't match. They match on the definite article, but not on the indefinite article. So a different thing is happening here. Even though they look identical, something else is happening. And that makes a difference because if you have die Mutter as the subject and then der Mutter as the indirect object, that will really change how you translate the sentence and how you understand the sentence. Then the neuter is dem Kind, and you can see dem for the masculine and dem for the neuter, and then einem the same thing. So you don't have to learn separate ones for that. They're the same. But then the dative plural is the most complicated one, or it's the one that's hardest to remember sometimes. But den is, you might recognize the den from the accusative. So the singular masculine accusative den happens to be this, it happens to also be den for the dative plural, but then you also get this extra in. So depending on how a noun ends with its plural, see the singular is das Kind, right? And then the plural is Kinder with the er. And then in the dative plural, if it's phonetically possible, you do add an en there to it. Yeah, so den Kindern. So let's look at some examples of how you can use indirect and direct objects. So we have the picture. Here's Sylvia and the child and the chocolate. So we have this broken up sentence and we want to make a real sentence out of it. Sylvia kaufen das Kind in the dative, die Schokolade in the accusative. So we would say Sylvia kauft dem Kind die Schokolade, which is Sylvia buys the child the chocolate. Or you could say Sylvia buys chocolate for the child, to them or for them. And then you could translate either way in English, but in German, this is the construction. So you can see das Kind has turned into dem Kind to be dative, just like this chart right here, dem Kind. So Now we saw the child, in the last one, the child is the indirect recipient of the action. Sylvia buys, and then the child indirectly receives that action. But what if the child were the direct recipient of the buying action? That would be something like Sylvia kauft das Kind. Now we have Sylvia buys the child instead of Sylvia buys the child the chocolate. So it's a very different situation. So being able to recognize what case it is in will very much affect what's going on in the sentence, right? Sylvia buys the child. Okay. Was macht Jutta? We have Jutta reparieren, der Bruder, but we want to put in the dative. And then das Radio, we want that in the accusative. So it's like, this is the brother, it's his radio. She is repairing the radio for him. So we say, Jutta repariert dem Bruder das Radio, which is like saying, Jutta repairs the radio for her brother. If you did exactly like that in English, it might sound a little, Jutta repairs the brother the radio. It doesn't work quite so well in English, but it does work in German. So you would have to translate it as Jutta repairs the radio for the brother. But what if the brother is directly being repaired instead of indirectly receiving that action? Was macht Jutta? Jutta repariert den Bruder. So this picture is showing you Jutta repairs the brother as a direct object. But here, Jutta is repairing the radio as a direct object and the brother as an indirect object. So, Jutta repariert den Bruder. So, was macht, the brother is an automaton in this case, I think. So, was macht Jens? Jens gießt. Gießen means to water or to pour the water on, to water. Die Tante we want to be in the dative, and then die Blumen we want to be in the accusative. So, Jens gießt der Tante die Blumen, which is like Jens waters the flowers for the aunt. He waters the aunt the flowers, which doesn't sound great in English, but he waters the flowers for the aunt. So you see how feminine die Tante turns into der Tante in the dative. So let's look at, maybe we want the aunt as a direct object instead of an indirect object. Jens gießen die Tante, so that would just be Jens gießt die Tante, which is Jens waters the aunt. So it changes the situation radically. Was macht Herr Ruf? Herr Ruf, this is him, Herr Ruf. Kochen, to cook. Die Familie, here's the family, but we want to put them in the dative. And then das Essen, which is the food or the meal, we want that in the accusative. So, Herr Ruf kocht der Familie das Essen. Mr. Ruf cooks the food for the family, or cooks the family the food, right? So you can imagine what would happen if we wanted to have the family as a direct object instead of an indirect object. That would be Herr Ruf kochen and die Familie. Herr Ruf kocht die Familie. Mr. Ruf cooks the family, which is a very different situation, and they're not quite as happy about that situation. So here's the dative in the textbook, and you can see the chart again where we have der Mann becomes den Mann in the accusative, and then dem Mann in the dative. Die Frau, but then in the dative, der Frau. Das Kind, but then in the dative, dem Kind. So they all take changes here. And then in the plural, we have to really pay attention to that because it's quite a weird change in the plural when you have this extra in on the noun itself. Because die Männer, that's already plural. Die Männer, that's already plural. It's der Mann, that's a singular, right? But this is the plural. And then we change the article to den, and we add another in. It's a bonus in beyond the plural. So then we have some more example sentences. Der Professor gibt der Studentin den Artikel über ökologische Forschung. The professor gives the article about ecological research to the student. So der Studentin, it's actually feminine. This in ending tips you off to the fact that it's feminine, a female student. And then der Studentin would be, then you can tell that it's in the dative article. That's the dative article. And then you could translate it as either to the student, or if it sounds okay, you can also say just the indirect article first and then the direct article. The indirect object first and then the direct object. Yes. Die Sonne gibt der Erde Wärme. Die Erde bekommt Wärme von der Sonne. So the sun gives the earth heat. So Erde is feminine. So it's like to the earth. Because this would normally be die Erde. Yeah. And then die Erde bekommt Wärme von der Sonne. Die Sonne, it's actually feminine Sonne. But then these are both good examples of when you get feminine nouns. If it has just an E at the end like this, it's almost always feminine. So both of these are examples of that. The earth gets heat from the sun. This is actually a slightly different usage of the dative because von is a preposition and then you go in dative, but we're going to cover that more later. But it's the dative there, but for a slightly different reason. It's not an indirect object, it's an object of a preposition. Okay, der Regisseur erklärt dem Schauspieler den Text. So the director explains the text to the actor. So this is the indirect object, dem Schauspieler, and then den Text, that's the direct object. And then we have this question word wem, which means to whom. So it's the equivalent of wer for the wer is nominative, wen is accusative, and then wem is the equivalent of that for the dative. So to whom does he explain the text? Dem Schauspieler, to the actor. Wir zeigen den Besuchern die Bühne. We're showing the stage to the visitors. We're showing the visitors the stage. It could work either way in English. Yeah, both translations sound fine. So, den Besuchern, you see this is actually a plural. This is an example of the plural, den. And then Besucher wouldn't normally have this N. It's already plural without the N, but then the N is there. The bonus N is there because it's in the dative, not because it's plural. Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of constructions here that you have to watch out for. So we have, nominative, subject, and then verb, then the dative, indirect object, and then accusative. So that's the normal order, but you have to decide whether you're going to do to the student or to the actor, or just have it in the word order like we do in English. And then some verbs really give you a signal that it's going to be an indirect object coming next. So, erklären, to explain to someone. Geben, to give, often has both an indirect and a direct object. Kaufen can have that. Schenken, to it means to give as a gift, to present, I guess. Schenken means to give as a gift. Yeah. And then geben, we have geben already, and then schicken is to send. Senden or schicken, those are both fine for to send, and then zeigen, to show. So let's look at some of these examples. Der Architekt zeigt dem Geschäftsmann die Pläne für das neue Haus. The architect is showing the businessman the plans for the new house, or the architect is showing the plans for the new house to the businessman. Yeah. So in this case, we have either to the businessman or just the businessman in the correct place. So you can see der Mann is masculine. When you have a compound noun like this, it's the very last part of the noun is the one that's going to give it its gender. So it's der Geschäftsmann, and then it's going to change to dem in the dative because that's how it works. So, wem schickt der Architekt die Rechnung? To whom does the architect send the bill? So you can see wem is actually the dative part right there, to whom. And then dem Geschäftsmann, to the businessman, oder seinem Rechtsanwalt. And so this ending here is parallel to the en. Einem, seinem. This is his is a possessive that we haven't done yet, but you'll notice that it's einem and then seinem. It's the possessives work just like indefinite articles. So to his attorney. Die Regisseurin schickt den Journalisten die Karten für das Theaterstück. The director is sending the journalist tickets for the play. So see how this is plural here, and this is your dative plural. Den Journalisten. Okay. So certain verbs, they use the dative when in English we would actually be using a direct object, but in German these verbs it's just the weird thing about these verbs, they use the indirect object when you might expect a direct object. So helfen is probably the most common one that you need to really watch out for the dative object, and then danken, also quite common, and then glauben. These three are show up quite a lot. And what happens is that if you translate it, I help the director, it looks like subject, verb, direct object, but in German it has to be subject, verb, indirect object. So ich helfe dem Regisseur. And you can sort of think about it as I give help to the director. So give help instead of just help, and that helps you see how it's actually in the dative. And then wir danken der Professorin. In English, you would say we thank the professor, and it looks like subject, verb, direct object. But in German, it needs to be subject, verb, indirect object. So that's just the weird thing about danken, right? So you might think about it as we give our thanks to the professor. So this is feminine dative, der Professorin. Wir glauben den Berichten. We believe the reports. So it's actually subject, verb, indirect object, and it's plural. So dative plural, den. And then that this is a bonus N too. So the plural of there's der Bericht is singular. Die Berichte is plural with just the E. And then we have this extra N because that's one thing that happens with the dative plural. Yeah. Okay. And you say we put our belief in the reports is maybe one way to think about it, but that one's a little harder to make parallel. Okay. Other common verbs with dative objects are antworten, to answer, gefallen. Gefallen is quite complicated. We'll have more practice with that later. Gehören is actually an easy one, to belong to. In English, we already think of it as a dative object. And then schmecken, to taste to someone. Zuhören, to listen to. So, dieses Buch gefällt den Studenten nicht. It's sort of a backwards construction where it's like this book is not liked by the students, or you could say this book does not please the students. This book is not appealing to the students. We'll have more examples of that in a moment. But it's like the backwards construction that you get in other languages as well. Like in Spanish, you say me gusta el libro, which would be I like the book, but it's more like the book is pleasing to me. So it's the same type of thing happening here. Die Bücher gehören der Universität. So the books belong to dative, the university. That one's more straightforward. Okay, so let's try some verbs with dative objects. Schmecken means to taste good to someone plus dative, right? So der Kartoffelsalat schmeckt mir. We haven't done all of these pronouns yet, but you just need to know that mir is dative. Mir is the dative for to me. So der Wein schmeckt mir nicht. The wine does not taste good to me. Taste good to me. Mir. Die Tomaten schmecken mir. The tomatoes taste good to me. Mir. And you'll notice that we are conjugating for this subject here. And this is plural, like they taste good. So, of course, we're conjugating. Yeah, die Tomaten schmecken mir. Okay, so then this is the controversial question. Schmeckt dir Ananas auf Pizza? Does pineapple on pizza taste good to you? So, tastes good to you, pineapple on pizza? And then, of course, the answer is, ja, das schmeckt mir. Yes, that tastes good to me. Ja, das schmeckt mir. Oder nein, das schmeckt mir nicht. Maybe, no, that does not taste good to me. Gehören, to belong to. So, der Kartoffelsalat gehört mir. The potato salad belongs to me. Der Wein gehört mir nicht. The wine does not belong to me. Die Tomaten gehören mir. The tomatoes belong to me. Gefallen is a tricky one. So, dein Pullover gefällt mir, which would be your sweater is pleasing to me, kind of. But that sounds not great in English. You could say, your sweater appeals to me. Sounds archaic too. But so we have the nominative, which is the subject, ein Pullover, and then the dative, mir, right? So, but I think the best translation is, I like your sweater, even though it's not the most, it's not a parallel translation. You have to flip it around. But what happens is, the to me becomes I, and then your sweater, which was the subject, is now the direct object, right? So they switch. Yeah, but it's a very common expression, so it's important to be able to translate that well. Okay, so now we have the exercise on the next slide before we can move on to Kapitel 3.2. So here is a dialogue between Sabine and Thomas, and we have these datives here. We haven't done them. There's a lot of them are nouns, einem, meinem, and then there's a couple of pronouns. We haven't done those quite so thoroughly yet, but just all you need to know is mir and dir, like the ones we just saw. Mir is dative and dia is dative, and then everything else you should be able to recognize. And then we have some more sentences, and we have subject, verb, and then indirect object, and then direct object. So in translation, and then mark what noun case each one is in: nominative, accusative, dative. Yeah. So that's all of those. Vielen Dank. Viel Spaß mit den Übungen. Lots of fun with the exercises. Und wir sehen uns im nächsten Video. We'll see each other in the next video. Tschüss, auf Wiedersehen, bis bald.